If you're struggling to build real muscle, improve your endurance, and enhance your athleticism as a grappler, this could be the missing link in your training. It's called the repetition effort method. Most grapplers sleep on this style of training because it's not very fancy or flashy, but for myself and all of the grappling athletes that I coach, this has been the key to helping us handle more training volume, recover faster, and become more durable on the mat. If you don't know who I am, my name is Josh Settlage. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, and I've spent over a decade both in the gym and on the mat, studying and finding the best ways to help grapplers enhance their athleticism so they can lift heavy and roll hard. And in today's video, we're gonna be going over the repetition effort method. We're gonna talk about what it is and what it isn't. We're gonna be going over the main benefits of using this style of training, as well as how you can easily mix this into your own workouts and some common mistakes to avoid. If you've watched my previous videos on the max effort method and the dynamic effort method, you've probably heard me talk about or made references to the repetition effort method before. And before we dive into what the repetition effort method is, let's quickly review max effort and dynamic effort training. Max effort training, on one hand, is really focusing on lifting maximal loads and trying to produce the greatest amount of force possible by straining against really heavy weights. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the dynamic effort method. This method of training focuses on using submaximal weights, but moving them as violently, as explosively, and as fast as possible. Where the repetition effort method comes in is that on either end of this spectrum, we have this gap in the middle, and that's where the repetition effort method comes in. The repetition effort method, or REM, basically is using submaximal weights for lots of sets and reps to either further help stimulate muscle growth or hypertrophy, work on weak points or bringing up weak points, or improving your base level of fitness or general physical preparedness. All three of these methods fit into what's called the conjugate system. The conjugate system was a style of training that was created by the Olympic strength coaches of the Soviet Union, and it got really popular in the United States thanks to the OG Louis Simmons, who is using these styles of training to help his elite powerlifters. Now, just like the max effort and dynamic effort method, just because the repetition effort method got popular in powerlifting doesn't mean it can't be massively beneficial for grappling athletes who want to enhance their athleticism, work capacity, and overall durability. One of the key components about the repetition effort method is that you're doing more repetitions. When we look at max effort training, the way it's structured is that we're working up to a top set or a max for that workout, but we're only doing about 1 to 5 reps. So either you're working up to a 1 rep max, all the way up to sometimes even a 5 rep max. When you're using the dynamic effort method, the goal is to be as fast and as violently explosive as possible on every rep. And you really can only do that for about 1 to 5 reps. Once you start going higher than 5 reps per set, your maximum speed and explosiveness tends to fall off. So both of those approaches have a lot of intensity with lots of heavy weight on one side for only 1 to 5 reps on that top set. On the other end, with dynamic effort training, you are doing more sets for that workout, but you're still only doing about 1 to 5 reps. The repetition effort method, it kind of acts like the glue between those two training approaches, where you have a lot more room to do way more reps and get the benefits of doing some higher rep training. Now, you can focus your repetition effort training in one of 3 areas. You can focus on working to stimulate muscle growth, which for myself and many of the grappling athletes that I've coached, we have found that using the repetition effort method within 8 to 15 reps has given us the biggest bang for our buck with stimulating muscle growth. Now, I'm fully aware that there's studies that show that you can stimulate muscle growth with as little as 5 reps per set, all the way up to 30 reps per set. However, when you're looking at that range, there are some secondary benefits to using really low reps for hypertrophy and using really high reps for hypertrophy. When doing more traditional strength work and you're sticking within those 5 to 6 reps per set, you get the benefit of building muscle or stimulating hypertrophy while also getting the secondary benefit of increasing strength, and that's awesome. If you were to do 30 reps per set, the weight is so light, you're really not going to get much strength gain, but you are doing a ton of reps, which means that you're building some pretty serious local muscular endurance in addition to stimulating muscle growth. When it comes to working with grapplers, it's really important that we try to lean more on the side of if we can build a bigger muscle, that's fantastic. And if we're going to be building a bigger muscle, we also want to try to be getting stronger as well. And so kind of sticking more towards the lower end of that spectrum, I found to be a little bit more beneficial for the grappling athletes that I work with. So when using the repetition effort method, if you're using it to help stimulate muscle growth, I found it best to stick within the 8 to 15 rep range. Now, if your goal is to bring up weak points, if your goal is to work around an injury or whatever the case may be, there may be times where you would benefit a lot from doing more reps per set, maybe even upwards of 15 to 25 reps per set. For example, when I had injured my knee, I really needed to build up the strength back in my hamstrings. So of course, I did heavy lunges, heavy squats, heavy leg press, and things like that. But I also needed to drive a lot of blood flow to the damaged tissues of my knees. And when you're doing lower rep sets, you don't always get the same kind of crazy pump and the same kind of extreme blood flow as you do with doing higher rep sets. So for a lot of the rehab work that I used for my knee, which I needed to build up that weak point, I was doing sets of 15 to 25 reps for different exercises, such as leg curls, leg extensions, walking backwards with a sled, walking forwards with a sled, and being able to use a lighter weight for 15 to 25 reps helped me get a crazy, crazy pump, which had some benefits to stimulate hypertrophy, like we talked about before, because it was still within that 5 to 30 rep range. However, the main goal is to drive as much blood flow as possible to those tissues to further help with that restoration process. Now, the third thing that you can use the repetition effort method for is to really build out your base of work capacity, really build out your base of general physical preparedness. I've talked about GPP in other videos before, but the simplest way to think about it is you want to think about your athleticism, your peak athleticism, as a pyramid. A pyramid is only as tall as the width of its base. So if you have a really short base or a really small base of work capacity, the peak of athleticism that you can achieve is not going to be very high. However, if you use the repetition effort method to expand and build out that base of work capacity, build out that base of general physical preparedness, your potential to achieve a much higher peak of athleticism is going to increase a ton. And so when doing repetition effort method training to focus more on GPP, focus more on work capacity, I like to think of that as going from as little as 25 reps per set all the way up to 50 reps per set. This is where we're really leaning into local muscular endurance, building up a ton of lactate, improving our body's ability to buffer lactate and handle those higher sensations of fatigue. If you've ever done hard grappling, you know what the feeling is like when you've been grappling, you're on someone's back, you're hand fighting, you're trying to sink into submission, and your arms just are burning like crazy. There's a ton of lactate buildup. You're having a hard time clearing all of that out, and you have a lot of fatigue, localized fatigue in your arms. Doing sets or doing exercises from 25 up to 50 reps per set can be a great way to help your body be better prepared to handle that type of fatigue when you're doing hard grappling training. Now, another way that the repetition effort method is different than the max effort method and dynamic effort method is that for the max effort and dynamic effort method, you're really only going to be doing big compound movements. So squatting movements, hip hinging or deadlift movements, pressing movements, pulling movements, things like that. With the repetition effort method, you can do a lot of compound lifts, and that's great. However, there's also a lot of room to narrow your focus on working specific muscle groups or working muscles around specific joints, and you can isolate different areas of the body a little bit more directly. So for example, I talked about when I was, coming back from my knee injury, I was still using max effort squats and max effort deadlifts to further help build up my lower body strength again. But I was also doing things like banded leg curls or single leg hamstring isometric holds, things that were much more focused and isolated than doing just big compound lifts. So the repetition effort method has a ton of value in that, it's very easy to use this method to work around injuries. It's very easy to use this method to kind of target very specific weak points that you want to build up and further enhance your overall athleticism as a grappler. Now let's talk about the main benefits of using the repetition effort method. We've kind of talked about it already, but the first one is going to be that it can massively help you stimulate hypertrophy and get jacked. Here's the deal. A bigger muscle has a greater potential to become stronger than a smaller muscle. And getting jacked, I think, is one of the best things grappling athletes can do to enhance their overall athleticism. Not only is building more muscle going to give you more contractile tissue that you can use to train to produce force, because you can't flex bone, you can't flex fat. Bone and fat do nothing to help you produce more force. Sure, there's the kind of work in tandem with your muscles to help you produce force, but your muscles are really the driver of helping you produce force. So if you have bigger muscles, you have a greater potential to train those muscles to produce massive amounts of force. And if we can produce more force as grappling athletes, that's really going to help us on the mat. The other thing too is that I personally believe that when you are more jacked, you have more muscle on your frame, you're just more durable. I have seen so many people in jiu-jitsu get injured, and I will say there's a common theme with people who get injured the most. The people who are constantly injured, like they always have an injury every single month, they're always getting banged up. It might not be like some catastrophic injury that takes them out for 6 months, but they're just kind of always banged up to some degree. Those people usually are not jacked. The people that are most durable, personally in my own experience, for myself and the people that I coach, the more jacked people get, typically the less likely they are to get injured. Of course, just the fact that you have tons and tons of muscle mass does not mean that you're never going to get injured. However, just being more jacked and by extension continuing to get stronger is going to be one of the best things you can do to overall decrease your risk of injury. If the max effort method is focused on driving up raw strength, and the dynamic effort method is focused on driving up raw, explosive, and aggressive speed and power, the repetition effort method can really help you pack on slabs of muscle. And really all principles of hypertrophy kind of fit within the repetition effort method. If you're going to be using this method to help stimulate muscle growth, there's a couple things you need to be aware of. First one is going to be one of the best things you can do is really make sure you're kind of sticking within that 8 to 15 reps per set range and making sure that every set that you do is within 1 to 2 reps away from failure. If you're sticking within that range, 8 to 15 reps, of course you can do a little bit less and of course you can do a little bit more. But if you're sticking within that range and you're taking each set pretty close to failure, that's a great sign that you're on your way to stimulating a lot of muscle growth. The other thing that you can do to enhance your ability to build muscle is to pick exercises that work through a large range of motion. Exercises that work the muscle through a larger range of motion tend to have much better results in getting bigger and stimulating greater hypertrophy than exercises that work through a very short range of motion. So if you're doing dumbbell bench press and you stop halfway, the dumbbells don't even touch your chest, yeah, you might stimulate a little bit of muscle growth there. However, if you take the dumbbells all the way down and get that big stretch in your pecs all the way at the bottom, feel that tension at the bottom, and then press up, that is going to stimulate way more muscle growth than doing a partial range of motion dumbbell bench press. The other thing that's important to remember when you're using the repetition effort method to help stimulate muscle growth is that you really want to chase that pump. You want to get the craziest pump possible. If you're doing 8 to 15 reps per set, you're taking every set pretty close to failure, around 1 to 2 reps away from failure, and you keep your rest periods short enough where you never lose your pump throughout that section of the workout, that is perfect. If you do those things, I guarantee you're going to stimulate some serious muscle growth, assuming that you're also doing the things outside the gym that are going to help you build muscle. Things like following a good diet and recovering properly. Another great thing about the repetition effort method is that if your goal is to stimulate hypertrophy, you can kind of sprinkle it in anywhere throughout your training week or anywhere throughout your training program. For me personally, I like to always end my max effort workouts with some repetition effort method training specifically for hypertrophy. So say I go to the gym, I do some max effort squats, and maybe my secondary movement is some sort of lunge. After I do those max effort main and secondary movements, I go right into my repetition effort method work focused on hypertrophy. That may include some sort of sissy squat or hack squat, some sort of leg curl or RDL, really to further stimulate hypertrophy for the lower body. If I did max effort floor press and did heavy pull-ups and heavy rows for my secondary exercises, I'll follow that up with repetition effort method training to further stimulate some upper body hypertrophy. That may look like hammer curls, tricep push downs, maybe even some shrugs and dumbbell lateral raises, things that are going to further stimulate muscle growth in the upper body. The next main benefit from using the repetition effort method is increased motor unit recruitment. I've talked about this a lot over this series of videos, and when you're using the max effort method, you do stimulate a ton of motor unit recruitment because you're straining so intensely through that range of motion and you're straining against those heavy loads, which then requires your body to recruit as many large and powerful motor units as possible to help you lock that weight out or to help you successfully lift that weight. When you're using the dynamic effort method, you also stimulate a ton of motor unit recruitment because you need to move fast and as explosively as possible. You need to go from 0 to 100 as fast as you can, and your body's going to recruit a lot of motor units to get that job done. Now, where the motor unit recruitment comes with the repetition effort method is that you're doing a ton of reps, and as fatigue starts to set in, your body's going to have to pull and recruit more and more motor units to complete the reps and to complete the set. This is great for grapplers because when you're grappling, unless you submit your opponent or submit your training partner in 5 seconds, you're going to be grappling for a while, and there may be times where you need to be strong and hold certain positions, hold certain frames, or you need to, hit an arm drag and you're fatigued. As you get fatigued, there may be times where your body has to recruit more and more motor units to get that job done. Using the repetition effort method can be a great way to help train your body to be able to recruit those motor units when fatigued. The next benefit from using the repetition effort method is improved local muscular endurance. Like I mentioned earlier, when you're grappling, you're going to experience a ton of local muscular endurance. There may be moments where you're on someone's back and you're hand fighting, your legs feel totally fine because you have them in a body triangle and your legs aren't gassing out anytime soon. However, you've spent a lot of time hand fighting, trying to get under the chin, and your forearms and your biceps may be getting to a point where they're starting to experience some fatigue. It's so important that you continue to build that local muscular fatigue so that way your body can efficiently handle that sensation of fatigue and you're better prepared for those kinds of stressors that you're going to experience on the mat. The repetition effort method is a great way to train local muscular endurance. Whether you're doing time sets where you do 60 seconds of straight banded curls, which is one of my favorite ways to train local muscular endurance, or maybe you drag a sled for sets of 2 to 3 minutes at a time. There's a lot of different ways you can use the repetition effort method for this particular benefit. And in my opinion, it's one of the most powerful ways to use the repetition effort method for grappling athletes. One of the other major benefits from this style of training is that it's going to help you increase your work capacity. Work capacity basically refers to your ability to get a lot of work done in shorter and shorter periods of time. So, for example, say you needed to get 100 reps done of bicep curls. If it takes you 5 minutes to get those 100 reps done, that's great. If you can get those same 100 reps done in 4 minutes or 3 minutes, you are improving your work capacity. You're able to get more work done in a shorter and shorter period of time. And the other component of work capacity is that you're able to successfully recover from bouts of work. So if you're able to do 100 bicep curls, say in 5 minutes, quickly recover, and then do another 100 reps of bicep curls in around 5 minutes, that's a great sign that you're increasing your work capacity. You're increasing your ability to get work done and successfully recover and do it again, and or get lots and lots of work done in shorter and shorter periods of time. As a grappling athlete, we are doing a ton of work on the mat. We need to make sure that we have enough work capacity, not just to roll hard, but also just to train, just to get all the stuff that we do on the mat done. Like, that's very physical. The jiu-jitsu classes, wrestling practices, it's all physical. And as your work capacity increases, you can handle more and more physical work. You can handle more and more training. My good friend and mentor Mark Bell has a quote where he says, "Do more, be more." The more that you can do, the more that you can handle. And using the repetition effort method to help build out that work capacity can be a great way to help improve your body's ability to handle more training and successfully recover from that training on the mat. Next major benefit from the repetition effort method is joint and connective tissue strength and health. And here's the deal. As grappling athletes, we get banged up. We are training in a sport that's literally designed to teach you how to take someone's joint and bend it or twist it in the complete opposite direction of what it was designed to do. And that has a pretty intense physical toll on our bodies. When we use the max effort method, that can be great to help our bodies become stronger and get more durable. However, we can't do that many sets and that many reps of the max effort method because the weights are just so heavy. With that dynamic effort method, we are improving our body's ability to be durable and quickly absorb force and produce force. But again, we can't do as many reps per set because the intent for that style of training is to be fast and explosive. The repetition effort method can come in and save the day for our joints and connective tissue because it allows us to get in a lot more training volume, apply a lot more time under tension, promote a lot more blood flow to those damaged joints and tissues to help strengthen those things, restore anything that might be banged up or a little tender, and further help us become more durable grappling athletes. All that to say, the repetition effort method is not going to fix you if you are injured. In my case, when I tore my LCL, the repetition effort method was part of that rehab process, but that was not the thing that was going to save my knee or the thing that was going to magically make it all better. If you are injured, you may need to consult with a professional physical therapist who can assess your injury, and they may tell you the bad news, like, look, dog, your knee is hanging on by a thread. No amount of knees over toes guy, no amount of leg curls is going to keep your knee from falling off your body. You got to get this thing looked at in a much more in-depth and maybe even need some surgery. Hopefully that's not the case for you, but I just want to put that disclaimer out there because I think a lot of times grapplers may misunderstand that though the repetition effort method can be used in a rehab context to help recover from injuries, the repetition effort method could also be used very well as a preventative measure to further help decrease your risk of injury. That doesn't mean it's going to fix all your problems if you really are injured. And the last benefit that I want to talk about with using the repetition effort method is that it can be a great way to help prepare your body and your muscles, your joints, your connective tissue for higher intensity loading. If you're brand new to the gym, it's probably not a good idea to just get under the bar and do the craziest eyeball popping, chony sharding, gut busting, heaviest 1 rep max you could possibly do. It's usually a good idea to kind of ease into that style of training and build a good foundation of strength, a good foundation of work capacity using the repetition effort method. So if you're a brand new grappler or if you're a brand new athlete to the gym, typically I have guys like you start out with the repetition effort method for a few months before we start introducing max effort or dynamic effort training. The repetition effort method, however, is not just for beginners. It is for any athlete. With all the training programs that I have in my Strength Matrix training app, I put the repetition effort method in every single training program because it is so beneficial and so impactful for helping enhance your grappling athleticism, mainly because it's going to help improve your work capacity, it's going to help improve your general physical preparedness. It can help bring up weak points such as your neck, such as muscle groups and joints that commonly get banged up like your elbows and your knees and your hips. And it's going to be a great way to help further stimulate muscle growth so you can get jacked. That's what I'm all about here, guys. I just want to help you lift heavy so you can get jacked and you also get in really good shape so you can roll hard. Now let's talk about how you can use the repetition effort method and mix it into your training starting this week. Now, when I look at adding the repetition effort method into workouts or into a training program, I look at it from three different perspectives. The first one being, are we using the repetition effort method to help stimulate hypertrophy? The second one being, are we using the repetition effort method to help bring up weak points or focus on weak areas? And third, are we using the repetition effort method to increase work capacity and to increase general physical preparedness? So when using the repetition effort method for hypertrophy, this can be done either in its own training day or following a max effort or dynamic effort workout. I'll typically pick 2 to 4 exercises. These exercises are going to be tied to whatever we did for the max effort movement for that day. So say you're doing a max effort upper body training session and you did max effort floor press working up to a 3-rep max. That would be your main max effort movement. Then your secondary max effort movements would be exercises that are still going to be pretty heavy, but you're not taking them to an all-out max. That could look like heavy dumbbell bench press, heavy shoulder press, pull-ups, dips, one-arm dumbbell rows, bent over rows. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do, but it's still going to be focused around the upper body. Now, the commonality between the max effort main movement and the max effort secondary movement is that those are typically both going to be compound lifts. We had a max effort floor press as a compound lift and our main movement, and then we had dumbbell bench or pull-ups or rows or dips or shoulder press. Usually I'd pick 1 or 2 of those for the secondary movement. Those are both compound exercises. So when we use the repetition effort method for hypertrophy, that's when I start to shift and look more towards using isolation exercises that target individual muscle groups that we used in our max effort main movement. So if for the upper body, that may look like dumbbell hammer curls to isolate the biceps and the brachialis. That may look like tricep pushdowns, either on a cable machine or with a band. That may look like dumbbell shrugs to isolate the traps. And that may look like dumbbell rear delt flies or some sort of cable face pull to get a little bit more activation and work for the back, and especially those rear delts. Those would be my 2 to 4 repetition effort exercises, and then that would be it for my workout. If I were to use the repetition effort method for the lower body, say we did some max effort Zercher squats. We worked up to a 1-rep max on Zercher box squat. Then we followed it up with heavy dumbbell walking lunges. Excellent. I would pick, some isolation, 2 to 4 isolation exercises to further stimulate hypertrophy in the lower body. So that may look like a leg curl. That may look like a single leg RDL. That may look like a hip thrust, which a hip thrust can kind of be a compound exercise, but we're really focused on isolating that cheek meat. You know what I'm saying? Or it may look like something like a reverse hyper or back extensions or dumbbell side bends. So when I'm using the repetition effort method for hypertrophy, typically it comes after my max effort and or dynamic effort work. Usually pick about 2 to 4 exercises. When it comes to sets and reps, there's so much variety that you could use with sets and reps. But like I said before, when the focus is hypertrophy, I personally like to stick within that 8 to 15 rep range. For max effort work, we already did a bunch of reps within that, around that 5 to 6 rep range on the low end to really get that blend of hypertrophy and strength. We've already did so much heavy stuff for strength. It's okay if we use some lighter weights for more reps per set to focus on some of those individual muscle groups. Same thing with dynamic effort work. If the focus is to use the dynamic effort method to get as fast and explosive as possible, that's great, but we're only going to be using about 1 to 5 reps per set. Once we move to our repetition effort work to stimulate hypertrophy, we can use a much wider range of reps, usually 8 to 15 reps per set. Now, the second way that we could use the repetition effort method is to focus on weak point training or bringing up different weak points. And there's so much variety and so many different ways that you can do this. But one thing that I like to do and the way that I like to go about it is just kind of taking an inventory of my body and thinking, what feels banged up? What feels really cooked right now? Maybe you rolled with a guy that is, I think they call them extra calorie grapplers or super calorie grapplers. Basically, you rolled with a big guy that all he does is just smash past you the whole time. Maybe you rolled with that guy and your lower back is completely smoked. this would be a great time to use the repetition effort method to do something like reverse hypers or maybe some landmine screwdrivers to get some coiling action in to help kind of take care of that lower back. Maybe you got your neck cranked on, or maybe you waited too long to tap to an arm bar. So you need to do some extra neck work. Maybe you need to do some specific blood flow work for your elbow to help your elbow start to feel a little bit better. That would be the time that you could do that. You can even use the restorative aspect of the repetition effort method as its own workout and kind of make it like a mini workout between your main max effort and dynamic effort workouts. So say you do max effort lower on Monday and you do max effort upper on Wednesday. On Tuesday, you can go in and take care of your elbow. Just, quick 20, 30-minute workout, getting a little bit of a pump in the tissue surrounding your elbow. Maybe you are feeling a little bit cooked after doing max effort lower, so you go in on Tuesday, quick 20 to 30-minute workout, doing some stuff for your lower back. That can work just as well. Now, the third way you could use the repetition effort method is to improve your general physical preparedness and to improve your overall work capacity. And again, there's a lot of varieties in this as well, but one way that I like to work on this is to, instead of focusing on getting the craziest pump possible, or instead of focusing on more like on the bodybuilding side of things, I really focus on trying to get lots of sets of reps and get really good at handling fatigue. This can take a variety of different forms. For the lower body, that may look like, hey, I'm going to do a few sets of 2 minutes dragging the sled back and forth. Or for the upper body, I'm going to do higher rep sets, 25 to 50 reps per set on different muscle groups to really improve my ability to handle fatigue in those muscle groups. So maybe that's sets of 50 on banded bicep curls and banded tricep pushdowns. Maybe that means you're going to mix in some stuff where you're carrying heavy sandbags for 60 to 90 seconds at a time. This is really focused on finding exercises that are going to help improve your overall general physical preparedness, but aren't going to beat you up so bad that it's going to have a huge negative impact on your overall jiu-jitsu training. If you're using the repetition effort method to help increase your work capacity, typically I try to find exercises that have a very low, quote unquote, wear and tear cost. For me, my elbows do get pretty banged up just from years of grappling and lifting. I don't have like elbow tendonitis or anything like that, but I've just found that doing a ton of heavy skull crushers doesn't feel great on my elbows. I can do some, can't do a ton. So for me, if I want to build up the work capacity of my triceps, I'm probably not going to do heavy skull crushers for 25 reps. I'd much rather use a banded pushdown or a banded skull crusher. So that way I can get tons and tons of reps without necessarily adding a bunch of unnecessary wear and tear on my elbows. Now, the most common mistake that I see grapplers make with using the repetition effort method is that they don't bring the right intensity into that portion of the workout. Maybe you're doing some max effort training and you're hype. You're bringing the intensity. You're blasting Tupac, you're blasting Metallica, you're having a good time. You crush a PR in that portion of the workout. But then you kind of put things in cruise control when you go into repetition effort training. And that's not good. If you want to get the most amount of value, you really want to see like amazing progress in your athleticism, you got to bring the same hype and energy that you have in the max effort portion of your workout, bring that into the repetition effort portion of the workout. Maybe you're doing dynamic effort training. You're blasting Biggie. You're blasting some Parkway Drive. Maybe you're blasting some Skrillex. Shout out to my dog Skrillex. I loved your latest album. You bring intensity to that portion of the workout, but then you start slacking off with repetition effort training. Don't do that. The same intensity and hype and excitement that you bring to the max effort work and dynamic effort work, bring that to your repetition effort work. And I guarantee you're going to see massive improvements in your grappling athleticism. There's so much variety that goes into how you could use the repetition effort method, and I strongly encourage that you just pick something to do and test it out. If you guys have questions about the repetition effort method, you can of course drop them in the comments below. I try my best to answer every single question in the comments. However, at some point, the rubber has to meet the road and you got to try this stuff out. So I gave some good examples here in the video. If you need help building out a training program or you need help enhancing your overall grappling athleticism, I have a free, 100% free training program that you can download called Grappler Accelerator. I designed it specifically to help you stimulate muscle growth, build a strong base of strength, and further help improve your conditioning. All you got to do is go to thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler, and you can download the program for free, or you can click the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have questions on how to get brutally strong for jiu-jitsu and wrestling, how to pack on slabs of muscle and never gas out on the mat, drop them in the comments below. I do the best I can to answer everybody's question. Make sure you guys check out the other videos on this YouTube channel and on my podcast, the Settlage Strength Podcast. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch y'all later. Peace.